Jerusalem.
Online portal is back, and this time it's better than ever. You've overslept and are running out of time. Radio
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the 11th of 19 candidate forums for the 2021 general elections in the Cayman Islands, being hosted by the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce in association with Foster's. My name is Mike Gibbs, and I have the honor of being the current president of the Chamber of Commerce. I will also be one of the panelists asking the questions this evening, along with Joanne Lawson, Secretary of the Chamber. I'd like to begin my opening comments by welcoming each of the West Bay Central candidates, Captain Eugene Ebanks and Catherine Ebanks Wilks, and thanking them for accepting the Chamber's invitation to participate in this forum. Your willingness to appear on the same platform demonstrates your willingness to, demonstrates to voters that you take the democratic process seriously and are ready to respond to a series of questions on the top issues as identified by a recent Chamber survey. More than 400 responses and over 200 questions have been submitted via the survey, and these will help to frame the questions for this evening's forum. There is certainly not enough time to ask all the questions, but we will do our best to cover the topics that have been identified as the most important to the Cayman Islands and the West Bay Central constituency. When the Chamber was established in 1965, the goal was to create an organization that supports, promotes, and protects the interests and welfare of its members and the wider community. Being nonpartisan, we have hosted forums every election year since the 1988 election. So for 9 elections, we have provided members of the community with an opportunity to hear from their candidates and educate themselves before Election Day. These forums have taken weeks of planning and preparation, with all the credit going to the hardworking Chamber staff, but would not have been possible without the financial support of our sponsors, Foster's, Affinity Recruitment, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART. So a very big thank you to them. I'd also like to extend a wholehearted thanks to our media partners, Cayman Mile Road, Cayman Life TV, Radio Cayman, Government Information Services, and ICCI FM for agreeing to broadcast tonight's forum. It is the first time that we have live streamed the forums on the internet, and we hope that this new format will enable even more people to watch them in the comfort of your home. It is now time to begin this evening's forum. I will therefore turn the proceedings over to Will Pinot, CEO of the Chamber, who will serve as this evening's moderator. He will explain the rules of the forum and introduce the West Bay Central candidates.
Good evening, candidates. Thank you for participating in this forum. Rules for tonight's forum are as follows. Each candidate will be asked a series of questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer if you choose to do so. And each candidate will be allowed to answer the question without interruption and is free to differ with an opinion or position of another candidate during your allotted response time. You should deal solely with the issues, and at the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will be allowed 2.5 minutes to deliver a closing statement. I'll now introduce tonight's candidates. Mrs. Catherine Ebanks Wilks grew up in the heart of West Bay with her parents and 3 younger siblings, where her parents still live in their family home. She witnessed the struggles of poverty and a lack of opportunities in her community. Her mother put a strong emphasis on education, and Mrs. Ebanks Wilks worked hard, graduating from C School in 1998. While considering her career options, she worked as a flight attendant with the national airline, traveling and broadening her views. In 2010, she began pursuing a legal career and studied at the University College of the Cayman Islands, graduating with her paralegal certification, ILEX. She began working as a legal secretary and worked her way up the corporate ladder by attending school while working. She earned her LLB from the University of Liverpool in 2015, completed the professional practice course from the Truman Bodden Law School in 2019, and she is now completing her on-the-job training, which is required in order to become a qualified attorney. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks resigned from the Law Reform Commission in September of 2020 and immediately began focusing on her plans for the 2021 general election. She's a founding director of the United Against Bullying Foundation, a nonprofit organization which focuses on prevention and the education of bullying behavior, and helped the foundation to push for anti-bullying legislation, which has now been drafted. She is also a director of the Cayman Islands Youth Development Consortium, which is a nonprofit organization that supports at-risk youth. Welcome. Captain Eugene Ebanks is born and raised in West Bay and is a businessman in the tourism industry and owner of Bayside Water Sports. A graduate of the American Institute of Aeronautics with his commercial pilot's license, Captain Ebanks also served in the U.S. Merchant Marines for the 4 years during the Vietnam War and has served as a fisheries officer and a special constable. He holds a captain's license from the United States Federal Aviation Administration and the United States Coast Guard and is a member of the Cayman Islands Seafarers Association. Captain Ebanks flew commercially for Cayman Airways from 1976 to 1983 and was captain of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II yacht during her first visit to the Cayman Islands in 1983. As a member of Parliament, Captain Ebanks currently serves as Parliamentary Secretary for the Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing. He has previously held a number of roles as an MLA with the Standing Public Accounts Committee, the Standing Select Committee of the Office of the Complaints Commissioner, the Standing House Committee of the Legislative Assembly, the Standing Register of Interests, and the Standing Select Committee on Privileges. He's a past president of the Cayman National Water Sports Association and has also served on the Marine Conservation Board. Again, welcome candidates, and we will come back with the questioning of the candidates for this evening right after these short messages.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay Central. I'm now going to turn over the proceedings to President of the Chamber, Mike Gibbs, who will begin the first round of questions.
Thank you, Will. And again, good evening, candidates. The first question, which I will address to Mrs. Ebanks Wilks first, and then Captain Ebanks will respond following that, is why should voters in West Bay Central place their trust and confidence in you to represent them in the Parliament for the next 4 years?
Having been on the ground in the last 4 years, I ran in the last election, and I have seen firsthand the issues that voters, constituents are facing in West Bay Central. My legal experience will help me to provide the advocacy that our constituents need in order for us to address the national issues that can only be solved in Parliament. In addition to that, I have a strong sense of empathy, not just being able to sympathize with the constituents, but being able to understand what they are going through. That is why my campaign slogan has been fighting with you, for you. Because I understand what the people are going through, it is easier for me to advocate for you. And that is why the people in West Bay Central will be making a great choice by choosing me to represent them.
Thank you. Captain Ebanks, same question, please.
Thank you, sir. I think I'm well suited to represent the people of West Bay. I have 20 years of experience representing the District of West Bay. I have been on the ground for much more than 20 years, and I've catered to the needs of the people as they became known. I think now is not a time for the Cayman Islands to change hands from men and women with years of experience to steer the good ship Cayman through this very challenging time in the history of our islands. Having faced the COVID pandemic, we have proven to be a role model worldwide, and I think we should remain on that course, not forget where we came from, and not become complacent with taking on inexperienced novices at this point in time in our history. We have to see this thing through. We have to be guided by the professionals. I mean, France has just gone into the third lockdown. The Cayman Islands cannot afford another lockdown by opening up our borders. I'm afraid that the younger individuals getting elected now would be too liberal to let the people. I mean, we need tourism, but we can't afford to open our borders at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Captain Ebanks, I'll start with you on this question. What top social and economic issue in West Bay Central would you seek to address if elected?
Okay. The social issues, one we have, two we have actually, that really gives me great concern is the issue with drugs in the schools. I think it takes greater parental and teacher supervision to bring this under control. We have allocated more funds for better security at the schools, and that's one of them. And the economic issue is finding jobs for the people who have become displaced, especially because of the COVID in the tourism industry. West Bay West Bay residents are heavily dependent on the tourism industry, as many families depend on tourism for a livelihood. So those two issues would be two of my top issues to deal with when elected on April 14th.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks.
The top social issues that we're facing in West Bay have not just appeared today. Thankfully for COVID has been a spotlight on issues that have been underlying for many years. The unemployment did not just happen today. However, since the pandemic, we now have an increased number of persons in West Bay Central and West Bay in general that are facing a high level of poverty. And as a result of that, We're having many issues with our constituents getting access to healthcare, housing, and the list goes on and on. In terms of our economy, again, this is something that we need to address, not just in the district of West Bay, but on a national level. We need to look at ensuring that we amend our laws to protect our Caymanian people.
Thank you.
Mrs. Eubanks Wilks, staying with you for the next question, focusing more on national issues. So aside from the reopening of our borders to stay over visitors, what two issues do you intend to champion within the new government if elected?
Education would be one of the first issues that I would want to address. And the other one would be, well, both of them are very important, employment and also our environment. But I'll just touch on education quickly. What we're having is we're having a lot of our young persons coming out of school and they're not ready for the workforce. And this then justifies them not being placed in the job market. We need to address our Caymanian students that are coming out of school that are not ready. And the way to address that would be to first ensure that from the very foundation of primary school levels, our children have a strong foundation in phonics. My suggestion would be to look at increasing the age for grade 1 rather than our primary students starting at 5 years old, starting at 6, and then increasing the pre-K or reception age. Also looking at more partnerships with the trade schools, between public and private partnerships, so that we can ensure that when our Caymanians who are in the trade schools get into the workforce, they are able to secure jobs. And this would be done by incentivizing these type of programs with the public-private partnerships. Additionally, ensuring that our children have a safe environment to attend school. And this would be by ensuring that the anti-bullying legislation, which has been drafted, is implemented within 100 days of being elected.
Thank you. Captain Eubanks, same question, please.
I think one of the biggest issues facing West Bay Central and not only West Bay Central, but the nationally, the whole island, is the education system. However, I must compliment the Public Works Department. I attended a leaving ceremony a few weeks ago where they have a training program in place, and they had fine young men and women qualified as carpenters, plumbers, masons, different trades, who had been through the public works school and who were employed, and most of them have already gained full-time employment before they were even, or as they were graduating. I think that is one of the biggest pluses we have had as far as our education for the school leavers are concerned. The issue of the safety for our children, that is paramount. And we cannot put a price on that. Here again, it's going to take a collaborated effort through caregivers, parents, teachers, and all concerned. There's an old Caymanian saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes more participation from the general public, especially neighbors and friends, to bring a child up in the proper manner.
challenge to the education system in the Cayman Islands, and how specifically would you propose to address it?
The biggest challenge that I see right now to the education system is there's the perception. The current system, the perception is that the private schools are better than the public schools. However, you must remember that the public schools offer more opportunities than the private schools. I think we have to get rid of that stigma or perception that you have to go to a private school to get a good education. We have excellent public schools, and the segregation, we got to get rid of the segregation with the public and private schools. I think that's one of the biggest issues that the kids are faced with today. Plus, what I touched on earlier, the drug use at an early age. I have a granddaughter who will be 13 in November, and she's a brilliant young lady, and she is very concerned about the amount of drug use in the schools. I mean, and it gives me great concern when a child at that age has been so aware of the environment around her in that relationship.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks.
Just to touch back on what I was saying earlier about education, starting with the foundation in terms of the primary level, just ensuring that by the time our students are at grade 1, they have a strong foundation in phonics. Also recognizing that all children don't learn the same way, and speaking to constituents who are teachers, some parents, and even some children, they are of the view that there needs to be different programs in place based on their education levels. Another way to address the education issue is by offering support groups within the primary level so that students who are falling behind are identified quickly and they're giving the support that they need so that they don't fall behind, because right now we don't have retention policies in our schools. Also, my opponent was speaking about segregation. And the thing about segregation is, yes, when I was in school, I went to school with students who were Caymanians and expatriates who were in the public and private schools. The problem that we have now is we're growing so quickly as a country that we don't have the space to facilitate them right now. And whilst we want to remove the segregation, in order to do that, we first have to take a long-term look at where we're going as a country and how rapidly we are growing.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ebanks Wilks, staying with you for the next question, which will be the last one in our first batch. If elected, are you planning to seek a ministerial position in the new government? And if yes, which ministry best suits your skills and qualifications?
Well, I think any freshman politician that sets out with the intention to become a minister would be a bit on a power trip. That is not my intention. However, if the need arises, I would make myself available. With my legal background and just being a female, I would probably seek to take on a ministry such as community affairs and tie that in with gender affairs. Like I said, mainly because, I'm a woman. And in addition to that, just the social aspect of it in terms of what we're facing in a country, the need for a reform of our poor persons relief law so that we can start to address the housing issues that we're having in our country, so that we can start to address easier access to healthcare, so that persons who are struggling, can have a streamlined process to get the necessary needs addressed. So that would probably be my first selection for a ministerial position if I needed to select one, and if given the position to select it.
Thank you. Captain Ebanks, same question, please.
Well, pardon my language. When elected on April 14th, I will, if I'm going to be offered a ministerial position, I would like to have the same minister that I have now with the housing, development, culture, and health. I have fit well into that ministry. I've served in cabinet in that ministry. I'm in caucus every week in that ministry, and I know it real well, and it's given me great exposure to the inner workings of a cabinet, and that would be my first choice. Other than that, I would have to think about what other ministry I would like to go in, but that would be the first choice in getting a ministerial position. And I have no reason why not I shouldn't take it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, candidates. We've gone through the first 5 questions. We're going to take a short commercial break, and when we return, the next round of questions. Please stay tuned.
Feed the family for less with Foster's Pick 5.
Choose from a range of meats including chicken thighs, pork chops, ground meats, beef stir-fry, sirloin steaks, and more, and only pay $19.99 for any 5-packs.
The meat is always fresh and never previously frozen. It's the perfect way to stock up for the week. That's dinner sorted.
Look out for Pick 5 in the meat department at all Foster's supermarket locations.
Foster's, better value because we care.
You hear people talk about the economy all the time. But what is the economy exactly? The economy is the flow of money between the people, the companies, and the government in the Cayman Islands. Why is it important to understand the economy? Well, just like the engine of a car, the better we understand the economy, the better we can make it run, and the more prosperous we can become as a community. The first important thing to understand about the economy is that the private sector is the main source of all wealth. Think about it. Most people work for companies in the private sector, both big companies and small businesses. But even if you work for the government, your salary comes from the fees and duties paid to the government by private sector companies and their employees. That's why we call the private sector the prosperity engine that powers our economy and drives the country forward. When business is booming, companies have more money to spend on salaries, bonuses, and promotions. Employees with more money buy more products and services from other businesses. All those people and businesses spending money generates revenue for the government, which pays for important services like education, roads, emergency services, and care for the elderly. So when the private sector is doing well, everyone does well. But when the private sector isn't doing well, like during a recession, the money dries up and everyone suffers. So when you hear people ask, how do we make our country more prosperous? The answer is pretty simple. Grow the economy. After all, you can't get more money from a system that isn't making more money. That's not economics. That's just common sense. In this video series, we're going to take a closer look at our economy to see how we can fuel our prosperity engine and how to make sure everyone benefits. For now, thanks for watching, and remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay Central. Gone through the first 5 questions. Now we're going to begin the next round, and we're going to start talking about cost of living, among other topics, and I'll turn it over to Joanne.
Captain Ebanks, this one's for you. What strategies would you propose to improve the quality of life and living conditions for the residents of West Bay Central?
What quality? What conditions would could you repeat that?
Sure. What
Uh,
strategies
what
would you
strategies?
propose
Oh, okay.
to improve the quality of life and living conditions for the residents?
For the living conditions in the West Bay Central, housing is a big issue. However, I'm happy to report that starting in June, we have 19 more new affordable homes coming to West Bay. In addition to the Lighthouse Gardens homes that are there now, will be 19 more with a possibility of another 3. But 19 more for sure will be started in June. One of the other issues that, especially the lower-lying areas of West Bay is facing, is the flooding issue. They're very much scared of the new rainy season that's coming up in June. We are in the process of implementing a better water management for the drains. We're doing 14 new drain wells. We've already gotten in some, and we're vacuuming them out and blowing out the existing drain wells that are there. That would be a big relief for the people of, especially Mount Pleasant and Bushtree Hill areas. They badly need that, and I think there are other things that could be done, but I think those are two of the main issues that would improve their living conditions greatly.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks-Wilks.
Well, I think it's great to hear some promises in terms of housing for the people in West Bay. I know many in West Bay Central have been waiting for quite some time to move from apple blossoms. That is one of the issues that we need to address in terms of the living conditions for the residents in West Bay Central. Those homes are dilapidated and certainly not fit for purpose. In addition to that, the quality of life persons just are struggling to make ends meet, to eat, to keep their lights and water on. And how to address that is by looking at the source of the problem, which is the cost of living. And again, that's something that can only be addressed by getting in Parliament and advocating for legislation to monitor price control, the implementation of a consumer protection law, which has been sitting on the shelf for a very long time, and there has not been any political will from any of our politicians to enforce a law that will protect the citizens in West Bay or in the country as a whole. So those are some of the things that I would propose implementing to improve the living conditions, not just for residents in West Bay Central, but for the whole Cayman Islands.
Thank you.
Staying with you, Mrs. Ebanks-Wilks, the next question specifically from your constituency is, are you willing to commit to holding quarterly community meetings and establishing a democratically elected district advisory council? If yes, what would be your intended outcomes of this meeting? And if no, please elaborate.
Absolutely. I believe that this is how true democracy exists. As far as I am aware, Parliament meets quarterly. And so what should essentially take place is prior to the representative going to Parliament, there should be a community meeting held with the district council and also with the wider public. Many persons in West Bay are not even aware of what the laws do, how they protect them. We just recently had an amendment to the human rights, to the Constitution, and that amendment granted additional time for persons to give feedback on legislation, and this is where our representatives need to serve us. The role of a representative is to sit down with their constituents, break the law down into layman's terms, and once that is done, then they get feedback from the people, which is what I intend to do. I don't intend to make any decisions that does not include the people.
Thank you. Captain Ebanks, same question, please.
Well, it's unfortunate that Ms. Wilks might not realize, but we already have a West Bay District Council that we meet quarterly with, and we advise them to any major changes that is taking place within the government or that is proposed to affect the whole district or the whole island. We keep them abreast of any new developments as they may arise. So it's one of those things where we invite everybody that we possibly can. Some people will show up, some people won't, but we do our part in trying to advise them of the changes that are about to take place or the changes that have taken place. But we like to let them know beforehand so they can be a part and get their input into it as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to rebut that.
You'll have time in your next 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Captain Ebanks, this question is regarding reopening of the borders. Tourism is an important pillar of the Cayman Islands economy, with many small tourism-related businesses suffering as a result of the closure of our borders. What are your views about the timeline for reopening the borders to stay-over visitors?
Unfortunately, just about all the tourism-related businesses are suffering because of the borders being closed. Reopening the borders I will be guided by the professionals. Here again, we don't want to rush into something, face another lockdown. Our goal for this government is to have 75% to 80% of our total population vaccinated. Right now, we have over 90% of individuals over 60 years old vaccinated. And anybody who wants to come in has to be vaccinated, has to have a negative CPR test within 72 hours before they come. There are still the criteria that's in place will remain in place until we feel, or the professionals feel it's safe to open. So there's no haste in reopening our borders to let the island become shut down, locked down again.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks.
Just to follow back on what my opponent was saying in the earlier question, the fact that I am not aware of an advisory council that meets in West Bay, I think that speaks to the disconnect between the members in the community and you as our representative. I just met last week with the district advisory, with the West Bay Action Committee meeting, and there was at least 50 people in attendance, and not one person made any mention of your advisory council. So that's my take on that. In relation to this question here about reopening, my opponent also states that I am too liberal and that I may be careless if elected in relation to reopening our borders, and I disagree. Forward thinking does not necessarily mean that you're too liberal. I am in support of getting our people back to work, but in a responsible and tailored fashion. Herd immunity is a must before we can reopen. And what my take on it would be is to ensure that we spend time educating and trying to encourage all of our residents to get vaccinated so that we can establish herd immunity as soon as possible. Also, just like any goal, you set a goal and then it's easier to achieve. So I believe that setting a realistic time frame, such as the 1st of August, and saying hypothetically, we're going to aim to have herd immunity by that particular date. And if so, then we will be able to take a systematic approach at reopening responsibly and only to persons who are safe to come into our borders.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ebanks-Wilks, staying with you, the next question focuses on road improvements. And what road improvements would you recommend for West Bay Central?
Well, the thing about West Bay Central with the road improvements is going back to the flooding issue. What seems to have been happening over the years is that the roads are being placed in a fashion without considering the homeowners. And so my recommendations for road improvements would be to factor in proper drainage. We don't really have a whole lot of issues with potholes in West Bay Central. There are some concerns about areas that need some speed bumps, some main roads that need pedestrian crossings. Those are the issues that I would recommend in terms of West Bay Central.
Thank you. Captain Ebanks, same question, please.
What has happened over the years, NRA for the last 3 years have not really spent much time in West Bay because of the east-west arterial expansion. That has taken priority over just about all the other roads in Cayman. The roads, most of the roads in Cayman have been, over the years, built up higher than the existing properties. So what's happening now, what has happened now, especially in November last year when we had the unusually heavy rains, a lot of the homes got flooded. But because one of the reasons for that is that the drain wells that were already in place were plugged up because over the years they had not been blown out or vacuumed out. So now we're putting in 12 more drain wells in areas that are prone to flooding, but we're increasing the size of the well. Normally it's 6 or 8 inch, now we're going to 10 and 12 inch, and we go to 50 to 60 feet, now we're going to 100 feet. We were also addressing the issue of the traffic coming out of Mount Pleasant into Bottom-New Road Junction. I've met with the head of traffic. I met with the planning department, and we're addressing that with the pedestrian crossing and changing the speed limits for that section. So the traffic in the morning gets backed way up into Mount Pleasant because of the speeding cars going to get on the bypass. They don't slow down to allow the people coming out of Mount Pleasant to get on the bypass, get on the road. And
thank you, Captain Eugene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Captain Ebanks, this next question is regarding the environment. What do you regard as the highest risk to the Cayman Islands' natural environment, and what measures would you recommend to address this risk?
One of my biggest concerns has been the landfill. However, I must say that issue has been addressed very recently. Just made some notes on that. So just the landfill has been 75% capped. The just give me a minute. The landfill has been 75% capped. The scrap metal has been processed and shipped out, most of it, some of it. The details of the completed project will be released at the end of this month. And I can assure you that after seeing what the completed project will be, the whole island will be very happy to see that we no longer have a landfill, but a properly organized waste processing plant. And it will be a great asset to the Cayman Islands once it's completed. You would not have no smell. It will have trees growing on it, and the public will be very pleased to see what the end result will be. But I can tell you the
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks.
Mrs. Ebanks Wilks, same question.
The highest risk to our national environment right now would be the fact that we are overdeveloping our country. We are no longer looking and feeling like the Cayman Islands. We are starting to look like a concrete jungle. And so in relation to the highest risk of our national natural environment, we see far too many after the fact applications, the destruction of our mangroves, silt in our water. And so the measures I would put in place to address the risk is enforcing the legislation that we currently have in place, ensuring that the Department of Environment has a seat at the table and that we comply with their recommendations, and implementing harsher penalties. A slap on the wrist for damaging what protects us from hurricanes is not sufficient. We need to ensure that this sort of damage is minimized, mitigated, and eventually just eliminated. And in addition to that, I think it needs to be a priority for any government when we think about the future of the Cayman Islands and our children and their children. So that's what I would do, is to ensure that we implement and comply with the legislations that are in place and put a halt on all of this rapid development.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the candidates. Gone through 10 questions. So we're going to take a short break. And when we return, the next round of questions. Please stay tuned.
March in Cayman is hot, but at Foster's, it's frozen.
Frozen Food Month is back, and we're giving away 4 $250 Foster's cards. To enter, just purchase any 3 products from the frozen department from now until March 27th. It's that easy.
You could grab a frozen pizza for dinner, frozen berries for a morning smoothie, and frozen plant-based sausages for something different.
Exactly. Just don't forget to enter online at fosters.ky/frozen food month. Foster's. Better because we care.
Here in the Cayman Islands, the private sector is the prosperity engine that drives the country forward. Just like a real engine. The better we understand how it works, the better we can make it run, and the better off we'll be. To help illustrate how our economy works, let's take a step back in time to when there were only a few thousand people living in Cayman. In those days, most people survived by fishing or farming for food. It was a simple, wholesome life, but it was a lot of hard work. Most people bought what they needed from their neighbors. As people bought and sold things, their individual wealth went up or down, but the overall wealth of the country stayed the same. In a simple economy like this, the only way one person could increase their wealth was by reducing someone else's. In order to increase the overall wealth of the country, one of our Caymanian ancestors would have to sell something, a product or service, to someone somewhere else and bring that money back home. In other words, we would have to export something. In those days, our biggest export was labor. Men worked overseas or on the seas and brought the money home, thereby increasing the total wealth of the country. Although the economy is much bigger and more complex today, these same principles still apply. Every time a company in Cayman sells a product or service to a customer overseas, the overall wealth of the country increases. Once it's here, it flows around the local economy between the government, the people, and the companies and becomes a part of our society's wealth. The two biggest sources of income for our economy today are financial services and tourism, often called the pillars of our economy. Tourists come here and spend their money. So all of the tourism companies like hotels, restaurants, buses, Stingray City Tours that make sure our visitors have a great time are helping to increase the wealth of our country. Just like tourists, clients of financial services firms come here and spend money too. So all of our financial service companies like insurance companies, fund administrators, lawyers, and accountants that facilitate investment transactions for people and companies around the world bring money into the economy and increase the overall wealth. The point is, if we want to increase the prosperity of our country, the best way to do that, in fact, the only way to do that, is to grow the private sector. In particular, the companies at the front lines that bring the wealth here from overseas in the first place. In the next video, we'll talk a little about how money moves around the economy. For now, thanks for watching, and remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine. In the last episode, we learned about the important role of companies here in Cayman that do business with overseas customers and generate new wealth for the Cayman Islands economy. But what about all the other companies in the Cayman Islands? How do they fit into our prosperity engine? Every business in the Cayman Islands falls into one of three groups, or tiers. Each tier plays a critical role in our economy. The first tier is made up of all the companies that do business with overseas customers and bring money into our economy. Companies in this tier are like the gas tank of our economic prosperity engine. The more we have in the tank, the farther we can go. Although most well-known companies in this tier are in financial services like Butterfield Bank or tourism like the Ritz-Carlton, there are many other well-known Tier 1 companies doing business with overseas customers, like Uniregistry, Health City, and all of the companies in Cayman Enterprise City. The second tier of the economy is all the companies that do business with other local companies, like IT and marketing consultants, or companies that sell supplies to bars and restaurants. These companies are also very important because without them, the companies they supply would need to buy their goods and services from overseas. So while companies in Tier 1 bring money into our economy, companies in Tier 2 help keep it here. The third tier is made up of all the companies that provide services to people that live and work in the Cayman Islands. Companies in this tier include supermarkets, dry cleaners, mechanics, gyms, doctors, dentists, architects, house builders, florists, and gardeners. These companies are important sources of employment and business opportunities for our people, and they play a really important role because without them, Cayman wouldn't be a very nice place to live. So to recap, Tier 1 companies do business with customers overseas. Tier 2 companies do business with other companies in Cayman. And Tier 3 companies do business with those who live here. Every company and self-employed contractor in the Cayman Islands falls into one of these three tiers, and they all play an important role in making our nation prosperous, helping bring money into our country, improve our economy, and creating jobs. And without them, the Cayman Islands wouldn't be the great country that it is. Thanks for watching, and remember to share this on social media so we can all help fuel the economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay Central. I'll turn over to President Mike Gibbs for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Will. Our next question, which I will be addressing to Mrs. Ebanks Wilks, is on the subject of coalition, potentially. Many candidates in this year's election have identified themselves as independent. If elected, would you be prepared to join a coalition group or party? And if yes, which of the declared political groupings would you be willing to align yourself with?
I've placed myself in the general election because I want to be a part of change, a part of breaking the status quo. In terms of groupings, there are many independent candidates who are running. Many of them are campaigning on similar issues that I'm campaigning on: cost of living, addressing healthcare, MP accountability, transparency. These are persons that I will align myself with. I do believe that we need to see a shift from a progressive-led government to a coalition government, and those persons who will help make up that new governance is who I will align myself with.
Thank you. Captain Ebanks.
As far as an alliance, I have been a part of this government for the last 4 years, this coalition government. A coalition government, an alliance, basically the same. It has worked extremely well for the people of the Cayman Islands. This is my 5th government, and I must say this has been the most productive and fruitful government I've ever been a part of. The trickle-down effect has also, of course, gone to West Bay Central. Yes, I'm ready, willing and able to work with any such alliance to get things done for my people. I was a party of the UDP, which has fallen by the wayside, and I'm still a part of this coalition government, which I am proud to be a part of. I am not a PPM member. I'm a member of the coalition government, and this government has done great things for the people of these islands, and I would be happy to be a part of any such alliance in the future.
Thank you.
Next question, Captain Ebanks, is regarding Caymanian employment. What are your views about the level of unemployment among Caymanians, and what strategies would you recommend to improve the system so that all Caymanians are given first preference for all jobs?
I think the work system that has been implemented is working fairly well. It's not perfect. In fact, it is a work in progress. We're trying to make necessary amendments as we find the loopholes. I think any employer who applies for a work permit needs to take a Caymanian, a qualified Caymanian, who, say, a college graduate or high school graduate or whatever the case may be, to take them on as an understudy to let them replace them. That will bring in the succession planning, which we have found that a lot of employers do not believe in. But it is one way of placing the Caymanian, young Caymanian, in a position of employment. Now, you might say he's overqualified or underqualified, but it would give him something to do. And a lot of times, you have to start from the bottom, come up. The only job I can think of that you start from the top is to dig a hole for yourself. So if that's what it takes, I think that has to be the case. But we have to get more Caymanians involved in the private sector.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks.
Before I answer the question about unemployment, I just want to go back to the last question. and just remind the public, the persons in West Bay Central, that my opponent here is hoping to get a ministry which would be an environment to protect the environment. And he also is hopeful to align with the same government that he was a part of, the unity government. And whilst they have done very well with navigating through COVID, this is also an administration that is pro-development, an administration that was going to build a port, and our representatives in West Bay were quiet on that. So I just want to remind the public of that. In relation to addressing unemployment amongst Caymanians, the first thing I would do is just take opportunity to reset. That's what COVID has done for us. That's why I'm running, because I believe that this is a chance now for Caymanians to have a seat at the table. First, we need to identify key roles that Caymanians can fill and put moratoriums on work permits in these areas until we ensure that our Caymanians have the opportunity. In addition to that, yes, be a bit radical and be liberal and think about our Caymanian people, the people in the water sports industry, by protecting that industry for Caymanians. And that is going to take, again, bold representation to take the pushback that's going to come with trying to protect that industry, which is what we were made from for the Caymanian people.
Thank you.
Staying with you, Mrs. Ebanks, Wilks. Next question focuses on the elderly. Would you recommend or support additional programs to assist the elderly population in West Bay? And please elaborate.
Yes, actually, I'm really excited about this. This is one of the programs that I've already started in my capacity just as a candidate. What I would like to see implemented in West Bay Central is a concierge program for our elderly. And this would comprise of persons who have been displaced in the tourism sector by busing our elderly to the supermarkets, to the clinics, taking them on outings. And this is something that can be implemented on day one. In addition to that, we house the elderly, those that need assistance at the Golden Age home. And it is overpopulated, or the last time I checked, which was just a couple of weeks ago, they were at maximum capacity. So the way to assist that from being overburdened is by ensuring that every other district has a functioning elderly support center.
Thank you. Captain Ebanks, same question, please.
Well, I just like to rebut one or a couple of things that my opponent is saying about stopping the development. You got to realize that to stop development, you also eliminate a lot of jobs for Caymanians. We can do a paced development, but we cannot stop the development. And as far as the port is concerned, I've never supported the port in Georgetown. So I just want you to be aware that I have never supported that. The other thing is, every other Wednesday, we have a program for the elderly at the Church of Christ. We have a bus to go into their homes or to where they live, bring them to the church for an outing, have them lunch, socialize, do little craft work, anything that would get them out of the house and the four walls for a few hours. And that is done at the Church of Christ. Then we take them back home. We take them to the Turtle Farm. We take them to Pedro Castle. We take them to East End on not every week, but on a regular basis. And so we take care of our elderly. I can assure you that my committee and the West Bay District Council is taking care of their needs as they become aware of them. And anything they need, they have contact numbers they can call my assistant, and she's right on it. She knows all of them that know her personally, and there's not much that they could want that we don't provide for them.
Thank you.
The next question is on economic diversification, and we'll start with you, Captain Ebanks. Financial services continues to come under external pressures, and tourism may never return to pre-pandemic levels. What are your views about diversifying the economy, and which areas would you support and encourage?
That's a very interesting question. The financial industry in Cayman is under constant scrutiny and pressure from the outside world. However, the Cayman financial industry is one of the best regulated in the entire world. I'll give you an example. About 6-7 years ago, I went to a local bank. They have my company account, US and CI. They have my personal CI account. I've been dealing with them for 36 years. I wanted to open a personal US account. The amount of criteria and the length of time that it took 2.5 weeks. About 2 years ago, just before the lockdown, I went into a bank in Fort Lauderdale. I have a US credit card to pay my credit card bill. The customer service agent said, well, why don't you open an account? I said, but the reason why is because by ordering a lot of marine supplies for my boats and equipment, most companies wanted a credit card with a US address. So I asked Steve, the guy who I buy most of my equipment from, if I could send it to his business address. He said, no problem, he'd get it and send it. But however, during the process of the mail going back and forth, I would get late charges sometimes. I said, well, I don't live. So she said, why don't you open a US account? I said, I don't live here. I really don't need it. But she said, well, you could pay your credit card. Just keep a minimum of $300 in the account, and every month we'll take out your payment. I agreed to do it. 40 minutes later, I walked out of that bank with 2 accounts. They wanted to see my passport, and they wanted to see my driver's license. That's all they required. They didn't need any background checks. They didn't need any bank references. They didn't need all the stuff that's required here in Cayman.
Thank you.
This island is one of the best regulated industries in the world. However, you remember this. This is a true story of David and Goliath. The FATF and OECD will not go after the US or France or Germany or none of them because they can't beat them. Because we are a little speck in the Caribbean, they'll beat us and the rest of the tiny nations right to death. And they will not stop until they ruin our financial industry.
Thank you, Captain Ebanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks.
I was enjoying my opponent's story about his banking experience. I felt like it was a bedtime story. How I would suggest enhancing and growing medical tourism, I would enhance our, is that the question there?
That's the question.
Yeah. Diversifying the economy. That's what I get for picking on Captain Eugene. Back to the question, diversifying the economy. How I would do that is by encouraging further promotion of our medical tourism market, which is growing and it's offering an opportunity to train Caymanians. So that's one of the ways that we can take advantage now that we're seeing a shift post-COVID. In addition to that, also looking at promoting more agriculture and seeing where we can become more self-sustainable as a country. That will also produce jobs for Caymanians. And then down the road, something that we could also potentially look at, another potential industry, and this obviously would be done by way of national referendum. It's just an idea that I have and that I would be supportive of if it's what the people want. Would also be looking at medicinal marijuana and distributing that here locally. Again, that would be an opportunity to provide jobs for Caymanians.
Thank you.
Thank you. Staying with you, Mrs. Eubanks Wilks, for the question number 15, the last one in this section, focuses on the potential of a national lottery. The introduction of a national lottery has been discussed for many years as a way of funding education and infrastructure. What are your views on introducing a national lottery?
I believe that it would be a way to fund education and, yes, our infrastructure. However, I believe, again, just like I said about medicinal marijuana, these are topics that should be put to a national referendum. And I would like to see more national referendums taking place where, again, we give the people the power and allow them the opportunity to make the decisions as it relates to them. So that's my thought on a national lottery.
Thank you. Captain Eubanks, same question, please.
I just wondered about one thing that Mrs. Wilks has said. She wants to stop the development or all this massive development, but yet she's encouraging medical tourism. Now, this tourism is requiring two major hotels, major hospitals, I should say, to be built, one in West Bay and one in Georgetown. If we're going to stop the development, how are we going to get the hospitals built? As far as the national lottery, I know for a fact that Florida uses the national lottery to support its education system, and they have one of the biggest education budgets in the U.S. So if it's well controlled and used for the right purposes, I would support a national lottery.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the candidates. Gone through 15 questions. At this time, we're going to take a short commercial break. Please stay with us.
At Bay Market Cafe, we know life can get in the way of good food, so we're here to offer a hand. Online ordering is back, and this time, it's better than ever. If you overslept and are running out of time, order online and pick it up. Raining? Get it delivered. On your way to go there or do that, order and pick it up. Sun scorching? Meeting? Get it delivered. That way, you can spend more time doing this or that with him, her, they, and them. So whether you need your morning coffee, you're craving a red velvet donut, ramen, a lamb burger, or a falafel pita, order the food you love and skip the line. Pick it up or have it delivered. That's Bay Market Online.
When companies do well, everyone does well. Not just the business owners, but the employees, other businesses, the government, and even the customers. Seriously. To learn how, let's look at how money flows through a company. When a company sells its goods and services, they receive money, which is called revenue. That money is then split up and used in a number of different ways. Some of the money goes to employees. To keep it simple, we'll call this salaries. Some of the money goes to pay for products and services the company needs to keep running. Those expenses are called overheads. Some of the revenue goes to the government in duties and fees. And finally, any money left over goes to the owners of the business as profit. So no matter what products or services a company provides, it's like a machine that takes in money as revenue and spits money out as salaries, overheads, government fees, and profits. It's really that simple. Every dollar that a company takes in gets turned into one of those four things. Okay, so how does it benefit everyone when companies do well? Let's take a closer look. First, with salaries. Salaries are important for the economy because most people get most of their income from their employment. Next, government fees. In the Cayman Islands, the vast majority of the government's revenue comes from duties and fees paid by businesses. That money goes to pay for important government services like education, emergency services, healthcare, and infrastructure. Then we have overheads. Quite simply, one company's overhead is just another company's revenue. When a hotel needs supplies, they buy them from local suppliers. Those suppliers turn that revenue into salaries, overheads, duties and fees, and if they're lucky, profit. Some people think that business owners make too much money, but the truth is, the average company only makes 7.5 cents in profit for every dollar in sales. And that's assuming they make a profit at all. The other 92.5 cents goes to pay for salaries for staff, overheads that become revenue of other companies, and duties and fees that pay for the government services we need. In order to become successful, most business owners have to work extremely hard and take a lot of risks. If it wasn't for the ability to make a profit, the owner wouldn't have started the business in the first place. And if nobody started any businesses, there would be no jobs for employees, which means no salaries, no overheads to support other businesses, and no money from government fees to pay for our government services. So yeah, when companies do well, everyone does well. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at why countries need economic growth. For now, thanks for watching. And remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay Central. Now turn it back over to Joanne for the final round of questions.
This question is regarding benefits reform, and I'll start with you, Captain Ebanks. Pensions and health insurance reform are top issues being discussed by many candidates during this year's election campaigns. What is your position on this subject? What reforms would you support if elected?
I think on the pension reform, well, the pension scheme is relatively new. I think the pension should be spread across the private and public sector. There should be more equally divided between the employer and the employee. And how we'll get to that is not necessarily an easy challenge, but I think we need to make sure that when people come to the retirement age, that they have enough funds available to them that they could live comfortably for the rest of their life. And however that takes, that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks, same question.
In relation to the health insurance, I do support reforming the health insurance scheme that we have. Currently, the burden is far too much for cynical, and we need to look at ways to spread the risk. And I think we need to now start looking at a national insurance policy, which can also partner with some of the insurance companies locally. In relation to pension, that is also something that many of our politicians spoke of during COVID, and they admitted that the current scheme is not fit for purpose. So we certainly need to revisit the current scheme. Also, when we're revisiting this scheme, we need to consider now that we have given many persons 25% of their pension, and that was to keep the economy afloat. And so we'll need to consider that when we are now reforming the pension scheme. And of course, we can't even think about how we can ask those persons who've been burdened to double up on any payments to increase that payment back into their scheme. So that would mean then that whatever plan or scheme that we devise, that it will grow the money faster while managing the risk. And after we implement a robust investment strategy, then we can start to encourage local support. Persons who have withdrawn their pension and may have it sitting in a bank account would then be more inclined to participate in a pension or investment scheme that is giving good returns on their money.
Thank you.
Mrs. Eubanks, Wilks, staying with you for the next question, focusing on the area of Barkers. Barkers is one of the precious jewels of West Bay. What is your view about the future of this valuable natural resource?
But before I talk about Barkers, I'll just follow up on what my opponent was saying. I think he misunderstood me when I said that we are overdeveloping. We certainly cannot stop development, but we need to have a plan, and we need to have sustainable growth. Most of the developments that are being built right now are multi-million-dollar condos, and they're getting huge concessions on the basis that Caymanians are going to benefit from these big buildings and that they're going to get jobs, and that is not the case. And the reason why I would support the medical tourism, is because this is an opportunity for Caymanians to be trained from the ground going up. But I would not support any type of medical facility that is going to damage any of our natural resources. Now, speaking of Barkers, this is an area that is very valuable to myself and just about every single resident in West Bay. And my view is that we need to ensure that our leaders are on the same page that we are as a constituency, as a country, as a district. And we want to see Barkers, the entire Barkers, preserved as a national park, not just the dike roads, but we want the waterfront. We want that habitat to be protected, and that's not the case right now.
Thank you. Captain Eubanks, same question, please.
Barkers has been, I grew up in Barkers. Barkers has been always been a special place to me, and it's still a special place to me. Unfortunately, most of the good beach is privately owned. There is a section up on the head of Barkers that is owned by the Crown, and one section on the north beach, on the north side of the beach, is owned by the Crown. I support Barkers National Park wholeheartedly. I've always done. I've made major contributions and major attempts to make sure that it was protected as a national park for all future generations, for everybody to enjoy, because it is a beautiful spot. And one of the few spots that we have left where we can go on Easter or any big holiday and camp freely without being run off by some owner of the property. So far, I can't say that 20 years down the road, some of the owners of the privately owned land will not want to develop it. It's gonna be very difficult. I mean, it can be compulsory, acquired by compulsory, but it's not an easy thing to do. However, the Barkers Park, the Barkers area should be, as much as possible, preserved as a national park.
Thank you.
Captain Eubanks, this is on sustainable development. Can you please provide us with your definition of what sustainable development means to you and whether you support the development of a national plan in the Cayman Islands.
Yes, I do support the development of a national plan. And I can give you one example of sustainable development. It's the channel we have in Morgan's Harbor right now. I've cut the first channel into Morgan's Harbor in 1981 or 82. Simply because the water in that area was so shallow. My dad had a 26-foot boat, and he had to anchor it off a quarter of a mile because he couldn't get to the shore because it was too shallow. That was when I was 10 years old, I started with him. I went away, and when I came back, I decided I would try to improve on that. I did the first channel, and now today we have, it's a role model of a development as far as the channel is concerned. It has created no major adverse effects on the environment. Now before we couldn't get any fish in it. Now we got turtles and fish and anything else. Plus we got big boats in there. We got a row of 3 restaurants. We got a shores development. We got Dolphin Cove. And as a part of development, I had to provide a public launching ramp. That's the same launching ramp you see in Morgan's Harbor now. That's a sustainable development. It created many, many jobs for people. It has done little and no damage at all that anybody is aware of to the environment. That's what I would consider a sustainable development.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks, same question.
Before I talk about sustainable development, just going back to Barkus Beach. Yes, Barkus Beach is privately owned, but that is because the government sold it, the same government that my opponent has been a part of. And so, yes, it's going to be difficult now, or not necessarily difficult, but it's going to be uncomfortable to have a government go back now and ask for the mercy of the landowner or a compulsory repurchase. But that is something that I am willing to do with future parliamentarians that want to preserve Barkers, because as you said, in a few years, the developer might choose to develop on the beach. And if he develops on the beach, there's no more camping for anybody in West Bay. In terms of what I see as sustainable development, it goes back to your question about having a national plan. We need to have a plan for developing our country, but most importantly, developing our people. We've been too focused on building buildings, and that's why I said, when I said sustainable growth, I'm not saying stop building buildings, but we need to now look at our people and see where we're at and look at our infrastructure. We're bringing in mass amounts of people here. Our population is growing and our infrastructure is not keeping up. And when you look at the plans that are in place for West Bay, we brag because we don't have a traffic issue. Well, that's about to change very soon in West Bay again if we continue to grow at the speed we're growing. And that is what I feel needs to be addressed in order for us to have a sustainable development plan is first, look at where we're going, look at what we're trying to achieve, and who are we achieving this for? What are we growing for?
I'd like to rebut that.
You'll have a chance in the next question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ebanks, Wilks, staying with you. The next question is on the area of affordable housing. The Cayman Islands has one of the world's highest GDPs per capita, but the Caymanian dream of purchasing or building a home seems to be slipping away. What strategies would you support or propose to ensure that there is affordable housing for residents?
Going back to these buildings, it's the new multi-million-dollar developments that are responsible for the inflation of the local housing prices in Cayman. So we need to control development, and we need to offset housing prices for Caymanians with concessions from these developments, which means putting a moratorium in place for duty concessions for large developments. so that the Caymanian people have an opportunity to gain housing and have the necessary assistance that they need in order to have the housing that they are so struggling to get.
Thank you. Captain Ebanks, same question, please.
Before I answer the question, I'd like to rebut what Ms. Wilks has said about the Cayman Islands selling the Barker's Beach. Cayman Islands has never sold on the Barker's Beach. The Barker's Beach was sold by our ancestors, her ancestors, and my ancestors, not the Cayman Island government. The Fintons, the Powers, Emans, Ebankses, they sold the Barker's Beach, not the Cayman Islands government, not the government that I'm a part of, not the government that was before me. So they sold the beach because the only thing they wanted to do was farm a piece of land they could farm or raise cattle on. The beach, they couldn't do either one. So to them, it was a good source of income, and they sold it, not the Cayman Islands government. As far as the housing is concerned, the National Housing Development Trust is building many homes. They've already built 136, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, affordable homes. A 2-bedroom house now, today, with hurricane shutters, concrete walls, appliances, air conditioning, $115,000. A 3-bedroom house, and this is concrete construction, well constructed, is $125,000. They've just bought 24 acres in Georgetown, 10 acres in Northside. I know they're in the process of purchasing Peace in West Bay. I would like to see the Apple Blossom site redeveloped with the quality of construction that's already in place at the Lighthouse Gardens.
Thank you, Mr.
Development.
Thank you.
This is the last question. And Captain Ebanks, we can start with you on constitutional reform. Would you support a constitutional provision which allows electors of a constituency to recall their elected member of parliament? Why or why not?
That is something that I've never really considered. I've never really thought about it. But if it is within the a constitutional amendment, yes, I would support. If a member of parliament gets out, is committed a crime or gets out of control, the public, the constituency should be able to recall him, yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Ebanks Wilks.
I would certainly support constitutional reform to recall an elected member of parliament by way of the constituents having that power. In addition to that, I would also support further constitutional amendments to set grounds in place so that we have more guidance and processes on how certain things such as parliament is dissolved, and also certain things such as being able to stand for a general election. So I do believe that we certainly need to have a constitutional reform, and the very most priority should always be giving the people the power because we work for them.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, candidates. Gone through 20 questions. It's gone by fairly quickly. We're very, very prompt in your responses. Very good. So now we're going to take the final break. And when we come back, we're going to have the closing statements from each of our candidates. So please stay tuned.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay Central. We now reach the stage in this evening where we're going to have closing remarks from each of the candidates. And we're going to begin with Mrs. Catherine Ebanks Wilks.
Well, first, I'd like to thank the Chamber for hosting this forum. And I'd like to thank my opponent for attending. He did last time, and I didn't expect anything different tonight. I'd just like to say to the viewing audience that when weighing a candidate, I know there are many things to consider, and I am not one to sell myself to the public in terms of attributes that I have that would make me a better candidate versus my opponent. However, I will just say to the public that one of the biggest qualities that I possess is compassion, empathy, and I just feel that being on the ground with the people over the last few years has given me an opportunity now to see exactly what we need as a constituency, as a country, and I know exactly how to go into Parliament on day one and hit the ground running. Although my opponent has made a few jabs, once on this podium tonight, and then I know on the campaign trail, he purports that I'm inexperienced, which I am inexperienced in the legislative assembly or parliament. However, I'm aware of the legislative process. I don't really think it's rocket science. I have a legal background, so I know how to read laws. I know how to advocate. And qualities such as compassion and empathy are not something that you really need to have a degree to have. These are things that just the common person would have. In addition to that, the other thing that I'd like to set straight tonight is that, it's been said that I am being funded by the needs assessment unit and that I'm getting aid from the government, and that does not make me a suitable candidate for the election. I just want to correct that statement. I am not being funded. I have never received any public funds from the NAU. However, because I chose to run in the election, I left my job at the government, and my husband had to obtain insurance through the NAU, just like many other persons in this community do. And no one should be shamed for having to get assistance from Needs Assessment Unit. That's why I am passionate about addressing easier access to healthcare. So on day one, I intend to put my feet on the ground and advocate and fight for my people. Thank you.
Captain Eugene Ebanks.
Well, I would like to take this opportunity to thank God for his hand of blessings on me and my life, and for giving me the opportunity to serve you, the people of the Cayman Islands, by extension to serve him as well. I would also like to thank the Chamber of Commerce, the sponsors of this event, my supporters in the audience, and especially my campaign committee, which is the most committed group of people I know in this island. And I'm happy that they're on my side. I would like to take this opportunity to address those who suggest that I may be too old to have been a voice for my people. I am not a big talker in the Legislative Assembly. I admit that. I am a worker for the people on the street, and whatever needs to be done in the Legislative Assembly, I will be sure to champion that cause. In fact, my position as a legislator have brought many motions to the Parliament now, not Legislative Assembly anymore. I made amendments to the penal code, and I've made amendments to the conservation law and many others. And I've also served on the House and Business Committees, as well as served as the Parliamentary Secretary for the Ministry of Health, Environment, and Culture. And I thank my Heavenly Father for giving me this privilege, and I thank you all tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates. I'd now like to turn it over to the President of the Chamber of Commerce, Mike Gibbs, for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Will. On behalf of the Chamber Council and staff, I'd like to thank the West Bay Central candidates for participating in this evening's forum. And I trust that the forum will help voters in that constituency to determine who to vote for on April 14th. I would also like to thank Foster's for their major sponsorship of the Chamber's candidate forums, as well as Affinity Recruitment, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART. If you're interested in viewing more of the Growth Matters video series I've been playing during tonight's commercial breaks, they can be accessed at growthmatters.ky. Please join us tomorrow evening as we welcome Ralston Anglin and Bernie Bush from West Bay North. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you will join us tomorrow evening at the same time. Good night.
At Bay Market Cafe, we know life can get in the way of good food, so we're here to offer a hand. Online ordering is back, and this time, it's better than ever. If you overslept and are running out of time, order online and pick it up. Raining? Get it delivered. On your way to go there or do that, order and pick it up. Sun scorching? Meeting? Get it delivered. That way, you can spend more time doing this or that with him, her, they, and them. So whether you need your morning coffee, you're craving a red velvet donut, ramen, a lamb burger, or a falafel pita, order the food you love and skip the line. Pick it up or have it delivered. That's Bay Market Online.